Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of The Fad Show. On today's episode, I'm going to be replacing the camshaft and replacing the timing belt on my BEW Mark IV TDI wagon. I'm not going to go over every single part that I bought here just to keep the intro a little bit shorter, but I will explain the camshaft I got in the last video. If you watched that, you know I did an inspection and found that mine was pretty worn, and I kind of talked about the different options that are out there. There's quite a bit. I ended up going as cheap as possible, and I say as cheap as possible. I got the cheapest name brand I could without getting like a Chinese eBay one. That's because I just got this car and I don't know the status of the rest of the engine. I don't know if the bottom end is good, so I don't want to spend crazy ton of money on it. So I ended up getting a Phoebe Bilstein camshaft, and this was $156, which I think is a really good deal. It's about 1/10 the price of a OEM camshaft, and it has a Rockwell's hardness within 1.5% of the OEM camshaft. So I think that's pretty good. But anyways, like I said, I don't want this intro to drag on forever, so we'll get straight to work, and I'll explain what I'm going to do. First thing I'm going to do is start with an oil change, just so I have fresh oil in the engine, and I already have the system bled, so it's going to get oil pressure to the cam as soon as I turn it on. I got some break-in oil, high zinc break-in oil for diesel engines that I'm going to use, and that's what I'm going to put in here. So with that, let's get to it. I'm going to put Loctite on it. I guess on positive, oil doesn't look too bad. Typical diesel oil. All right, now we'll go ahead and change the oil filter. This filter is pretty nasty as far as, I don't think someone has really replaced it recently. It's got a little bit of sludge on it. I don't really see any metallic particles though. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put the break-in oil in. I also got a new oil filter cap because I noticed this one was leaking. And it looks like the gasket is pretty crushed on there compared to the new one. So I got this Driven Racing 1540 diesel break-in oil. They only sell these in gallons, and this BEW takes 4.5 liters. So I'm going to put a little bit of just regular 5W40 in as well to mix with this. This will give it enough zinc to help break in the cam. I just didn't want to get oil and then have extra that I was never going to use. All right, I'll go ahead and start the car up, and you can listen to it run for a minute before the cam is replaced. You can hear how rough it is on initial startup coming from up here. It's perfect right at the top of the band. All right, so now I'm gonna drain the coolant. I don't have to drain the entire system. I'm just gonna try and drain like maybe half of it, so it's low enough that I can get the water pump out. So I'm just gonna untwist this and pull it out, and then I'm gonna try and use this funnel to aim it into my bucket. I probably should have opened up the coolant reservoir so it would have a vent, which I'll go do. All right, right, so this part of the job I wasn't super sure on since most people leave this out of the DIY, but I just went ahead and removed the fender well, and then I removed this little air dam here, which is kind of just held on by these things to just like grab a stud. The air dam or the wheel well is just a bunch of T25s, and then I removed this turbo to intercooler pipe here, and then there's like a little rubber cover that goes over the harmonic balancer that I just use a pick to get that out. And then I found my intercooler has the classic like self tapper drain on it that every VW TDI has, so I went ahead and just opened that, and then actually that's not too bad for the amount of oil that came out of the intercooler. Wasn't much, so that's good. I mean, I was a little bit worried just with how much oil you always see in the piping here, just the health of my turbo, but that doesn't look too bad. It looks about normal. So next step is just going to be remove all the interference up above so I can release the tension on the serpentine belt, and then I can remove the harmonic balancer, and then I should be able to roll the engine over using the crank pulley there, or whatever that is. First part of this job is just a bunch of interference removal. Get your hose cam pliers, pretty much just remove everything from the passenger side of the engine bay. Some of the old hoses are definitely a little stubborn. I also made sure to take pictures of the hose routing of everything before I started taking it apart. This definitely came in handy when it came time to putting everything back together. All right, so now I got all the interference out of the way, removed the power steering reservoir, removed the coolant expansion tank, I removed the fuel lines going from the fuel rail over to the fuel filter. And that was probably the hardest part of this job so far, was just removing all those old lines just because they were so stuck on there. It's kind of messy. Everything smells like diesel now, and the power steering. Kind of just have to undo the hose and just walk it down to a receptacle below. But now I have access that I can go ahead and remove the upper timing cover. Sweet. I guess probably now is as good a time as any to go ahead and remove the upper serpentine, or remove the serpentine belt tensioner also. All right, so now I'm gonna undo the serpentine belt tensioner in order to get the serpentine belt off. In order to do that, I'm just using a 16mm wrench, and then I'm going to push or turn it clockwise like this. And then I have this scrap or junk Allen wrench from my toolbox that I'm just going to stick through here. Make sure it doesn't go into the alternator like that, and that should hold the tension off so I can get the belt off. And actually, before I take the belt off, I'm going to take a picture of how it's routed. All right, so I guess now is as good a time as any to go ahead and remove the valve cover. All right, so just when I thought this project was going surprisingly smooth and easy, I got to these harmonic balancer bolts, and they are not wanting to come off without stripping. I think part of the problem was the kind of cheap Amazon kind of socket Allen I had, or hex head I had, so I went ahead and bought a nice set, so we'll see if that helps at all. Also, I've been spraying these every day for a couple of days with penetrant, but because of this recess here, I'm not really sure that's actually getting to the threads. Also, I'm going to give them a little bit of heat. I don't want to put too much heat in these because this is obviously bolted into the crankshaft, and you could damage the crankshaft seal if you got it too hot. So I'm just going to give them a little bit of heat, and then I'm going to let them cool off to ambient. Idea being that will kind of expand and contract some of the bonds. And now that I say that, I'm realizing that this housing is plastic too, so I might forego the heat. I have been giving this penetrant every day, so I guess I'll just go hit it again. Like I said, I'm not really sure how much of this is actually making its way to the threads, but it makes me feel good. Yeah, and I'm not going to give it heat because I didn't think about the fact that this is all plastic here too, so I'm just going to end up damaging something. But first I'm going to try my new nice new Tecton Allen head, and then if that doesn't work, I'll use a extractor. I also went ahead and put the serpentine belt back on because it was kind of hard to hold this 19mm while trying to get these out. So we'll see if this provides enough counter torque where I don't spin the engine while trying to get these off. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hammer the socket on too to try and jostle the threads on it. And even this like nice new 6mm is not fitting all that well on here. But I got it. Sweet. And you see now it's stuck in here because it's stripped. Well, there's one. And my light. There's two. Sweet. All right, so now the harmonic balancer's off. And it looks like there's just a bunch of 10mm, or these probably are 8 or 10s to remove this lower timing cover. So probably not gonna be able to see if I'm removing them because I'll be in the way. So I'll go ahead and take care of that. All right, so now that I got the timing cover off, I was able to move the engine to top dead center. It's kind of confusing on this cheap Amazon crank lock because the arrow isn't actually straight on the timing mark. In my case, it had to be to the left. First I tried the right, and then the cam sprocket wasn't lining up. So I'm confident that this is top dead center because that's fitting in semi nicely, at least to a point where it's not going to be able to move. And then if I come up top, this cam pocket or whatever that's perfectly lined up. So, and then I'm going to do one more method to confirm we're at top dead center and pull the tandem pump off. And then once I get the tandem pump off, the basically the hub or sprocket in there should be perpendicular with the head. Also, it's kind of hard to see, but cylinder 1 should be in a V. So if you see the cam lobes on cylinder 1, one's kind of facing out this way, and the other's facing out that way, kind of making a V shape. So the engine is at top dead center. So I guess next I'm going to pull the tandem pump off. All right, so the tandem pump is on the end of the engine here, and it's just held in by 4 Allen wrenches. And I was able to get an inspection, pull this back enough and get an inspection mirror in there, and I can see that basically you can see there's a line or slit in the camshaft where this actually mates with, and turns. But basically that face is flat with the top of the head here, and it's basically horizontal when the engine's at top dead center. So I have that verifying we're at top dead center, have the cam lock in, and then also the crank lock. So now we're ready to pull the timing belt and camshaft. I don't want to undo the motor mount right now until I'm ready to replace the timing belt. So I think I'm just gonna undo the tensioner and try and get this belt off and just leave it sitting here while I replace the cam. And then the last thing I'll do is undo the motor mount and replace the timing belt. I guess my thought there is just minimize the amount of time that the engine's just supported with a jack. One thing I'll say with the tandem pump, there's no smell-o-vision right now, but it leaks a lot of diesel when you pull it off. Just like pour diesel down the front of my block and down the transmission. So now my garage smells like diesel again. But yeah, hopefully it didn't get on the exhaust. The exhaust is pretty far away, so I'm just gonna basically wash everything down with a bunch of brake clean once I'm done. All right, so I undid the tension on the timing belt tensioner, and it doesn't want to come off. This is something I was kind of expecting. Saw in other videos I watched that you kind of just have to pull the sprocket off to get it off. Which I guess is good in a way that they design it like that, because it keeps you from skipping timing if the tensioner kind of loosens or whatever. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these cam sprocket bolts. Go ahead and take my timing tool out. Okay. I did forget that I wanted to mark these first, but they have witness marks on here, so that's good. Like you can see, just worn in where they've been sitting. I forgot I wanted to mark these before I took them out so I can get the timing kind of close to back to where it was. These are actually used for adjusting these three. It's kind of why it has like a elongated area in there. All right, now we'll see if I can get this off. There we go. I did mark the timing belt just in case for some reason I had to put this one back on. But yeah, like I said, I'm just gonna leave that there until I take the motor mount out, move this out of the way, and then there's a puller tool used to remove this cam sprocket. So I guess I'll do that next. All right, so now I'm gonna remove the camshaft sprocket bolt. There's a special tool to hold it. And this is going to be very important to counter hold, because if you end up moving the camshaft, obviously you're going to have contact with the valves, and then the engine is toast. Don't really like the positioning of this. All right, I think I didn't have any valve contact there. And I'm just gonna remove this a couple of turns because I'm gonna be using a puller to get the sprocket off. I bought this tool from TDI. I guess alternatively, especially if you're replacing the camshaft, you can just wait until you get the camshaft out and put it in a vise and just smack this off. I don't know. I don't know why I bought it. Perhaps I should have saved some money. But nevertheless, I'm here now, so. All right, I'm feeling royally at this. I'm just gonna remove it with the camshaft. I really don't want to damage the valves. And now I'm afraid to loosen it because I already turned it slightly. All right. moving forward. All right, now I'm gonna remove the injector rockers. I've already labeled them. I'm going to, so for these, you start with the outer bolts. You remove the outer bolts first, then the inner bolts. So I'm gonna loosen these all by hand. All right, so I labeled all the cam covers, or cam bearing covers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna start at 5 to loosen first. We have 5, 1, and then 3, and then 2, 4, All right, now that I have everything taken apart, I guess I'll go ahead and share the carnage. Everyone likes to see a good engine carnage. So first off, I guess, not sure how well this shows up on video, but obviously this first lobe is flat as well as this one. This one's actually probably the worst and corresponded with probably the worst lifter back here. So yeah, definitely some worn down cams. Obviously the chamfer is all gone on these. It's like razor sharp. And then you can see how dished these lifters are. Like, that's insane. Like, I can't believe this one was probably about to punch through as well as this one. And then the bearings, also, the bottom ones are just completely shot. Like, that one's almost down past the bearing material. It has score marks in it. And there's no smell vision, but you can actually smell the, like, burning metallic smell on these bearings too. So yeah, definitely needed to be done. So hopefully it will run a lot better, but I feel like just between the the loss of lobe here in the dish to surface here, I'm going to get way more valve lift after replacing this, which hopefully will make the car run a lot better. So one more thing I found out, I was doing some research online. I found these two little pieces of aluminum. They actually fell into like the bolt holes for the cam journal caps. It looks like these go in here, and I was looking online, and I guess this is a common PD problem, that those fall out, and then you actually lose oil pressure in your rocker assembly because that's the oil journal. If you can't find them, you can actually use the cam cap bolts. They are actually an interference fit for the same hole or whatever, so you can just cut off a piece of those and jam it in there. I'm gonna reuse these. I'll just hammer them in here, but I'll put a little bit of Loctite on them, just hopefully so this doesn't happen again. Yeah, so as I'm editing this video, I'm realizing that it's going to be ridiculously long if I do it all in one video, so I've decided to break it into 2 parts. So on this episode, obviously I got everything taken apart, inspected the damage, I guess I shouldn't say damage, inspected the wear on the items inside, and on part 2, I'm going to install the new cam, new lifters, new timing belt, and just put everything back together and button it up. And I am happy to report that the car is actually running great, as a little spoiler alert. So thank you guys for watching. As always, please like and subscribe if you really liked it. And stay tuned for next time when I put everything back together.